Hi, I'm Keegan Flegner. When I was in first grade, I was diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. Since that time, sports have played a huge role in changing my life. So I want to show the world how all kinds of sports can help all kinds of people with all kinds of mental and emotional challenges. Welcome to Sports on the Spectrum. My guest today is Mathias James. When I started playing basketball at a new basketball league at the Santa Monica YMCA, it consisted of only 4 teams. But by the time I left, it had grown to 30 teams and 250 players. Mathias was there from the very beginning of the league, first as a referee before becoming a coach and then a league administrator. His contributions to the league were so great that in 2018, he was inducted into the Santa Monica YMCA Basketball Hall of Fame. Please join me in welcoming Mathias James to Sports on the Spectrum. It's safe to say that you were present at just about every important basketball moment in my life. And I want to share one moment from that firsthand. So this, I'm sure, will bring back flashbacks, but I hope in a good way. Mm-hmm. Check out this picture right here. This is me, and there's you in the background reffing, just like, any other day. And it's just like, it's so casual and yet it's so cool.
Yeah, definitely. That's an old school picture.
Yeah. Man. No, I mean, we both looked so different back then.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. My hairline.
Yeah, it's very deja vu for both of us. Even me. It's like I still remember those days, remembering wearing those shoes, playing that jersey on that team, on that court.
You know, it's funny. You've come such a long way, because then you were just all arms and legs and still
right.
kind of getting used to your awkwardness and
I didn't even consider myself a big man at the time. Like, I was all about playing on the perimeter.
Exactly. I mean, well, that's I hate to say it, that's what you youngsters see these days.
Right.
Ball handling and three-point shooting and
right.
But it's funny working with you and seeing how much you've grown and how tall you've gotten.
Yeah, no.
I was watching some NBA games just the other night, and I'm like, the big man is back.
Right.
Like, there's so many good big players in the league.
And I mean, for you, it's personal, I think, too, because I'm pretty sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were like a teenager and a young adult right in the heart of the 90s when the big men ruled the NBA. You had guys like Hakeem Olajuwon and Karl Malone, who just dominated the game.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I grew up. My dad used to have season tickets to the Forum.
There you go.
When we were growing up, so I had a chance to watch Magic and Byron and Norm Nixon and
all these great big men. And it's weird for me too, because while even from my earliest years, I always like to consider myself a perimeter player. My favorite players around the NBA were always big guys. Like, my favorite player from an early stage was DeAndre Jordan on the Clippers, for example. It's like I was just obsessed with him, and it was the weirdest thing. It's like I never considered the fact that it's like, well, I play a completely different position than him. He's my favorite guy, and it's like everything else that goes along.
I just wanted to clarify one thing with you. I used to coach and be a phys ed teacher at New Roads. I'm not anymore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So now I do private training. So I'm still training kids in basketball. So
well, there you go.
That was a few years back that I did that. So
yeah. And I guess I'll just bring up a little personal background for those who don't know. When I was a sophomore in high school, I decided to transfer away from my old school to a new school. And one of the schools I considered transferring to at the time, I didn't go there in the end, was New Roads. So it's like, as a result, I'm not sure you were coaching at the time, but it's like, if you were, it's like, that would have been pretty neat.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I was going to Santa Monica College right out of high school, mm-hmm. I started coaching at New Roads, but it wasn't called New Roads back then. It was called New Horizons, and it was right across the street from Santa Monica College.
There you go.
Right there on Pearl Street.
Right.
And the elementary school specialized in ADHD and AD.
Yep. And it still does.
It still does. Yeah. So that was my real first experience.
Right.
In terms of working on a day-to-day basis with kids who were on that spectrum.
Right. I mean, that's part of the reason we considered it in the first place. We knew it had a very good program for kids like that. So
yeah, exactly. And it gave me really good insight. And it also helped that I have a nephew who I helped raise, who was also ADHD. So,
Right.
and who you know very well, because you
Yes.
basically grew up with him for half of your life.
No, and I'm sure at some point later we will absolutely host an episode with him too and provide more insight into that. But yes, I absolutely understand how important that is for both you and for everybody else involved in that kind of thing.
I think he would love to have that conversation with you. He's got some great stories about that himself that he can tell you from the past.
Yeah.
And how he helped to overcome that,
Yeah, no, I'm sure both me and my audience would love to hear that. So we will definitely get to that at some point. But I guess going back to you for a second, and first, I think I want to start off again on a more not personal, but like more about you as a person. So I guess my first question is, and going back actually to talking about you liking the big man growing up and going to those Laker games. What were basically your very first memories of sport moments like that, and just in general, not just watching sports, but also playing them, whatever, it's like, what did you take away from that?
Well, I'll give you a really early story, really early in my youth.
Sure.
Before I even got into the YMCA in Santa Monica, I used to go to the boys club in Santa Monica.
Oh, okay.
Now, it was the boys club when I was a kid. Not until later, in maybe the mid 90s, did they call it the Boys and Girls Club. But when I was playing basketball there, it was called the Boys Club. And that was my first taste of playing AAU style tournament basketball with a lot of the guys that I grew up with.
Yeah.
One of my good friends that I grew up with, Cyrus Yarborough, who also used to be on a show on MTV called The Real World.
Okay.
He was one of my first teammates, and our families were really close, and we would travel to all these little places, the boys club, playing these in these huge tournaments where they were like 200 different teams from all over the LA district. And that was back when you would get a big trophy and not just everybody would get these little participation trophies for playing basketball.
It was all or nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a lot of fun. We would go do that. And back then the boys club had this game room and they had a big screen. So after our games, if we finished our games early enough, we would all rush into the game room because we all wanted to go watch Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson play a basketball game when we were all little kids, because we were in awe of these guys. And we always knew when Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson were playing because we were all Laker fans back then.
Of course you were. Yeah, no, it's like anything like that.
Yeah, so that was probably one of my first experiences.
That's a great experience, man. I would die for something like that.
Yeah, it was great, man. One of my first coaches, Joey, at the boys club, he was a great guy. He passed away not too long ago. Everybody knew him in Santa Monica that grew up. He really helped me out a lot. When my mom was struggling. When she was a single parent for a while, and she did a lot for me and my sisters. And it was definitely something that I loved. Going to the Laker thing, it's interesting because I was fortunate to have a father who was a big Laker fan. And he made enough money that he could buy tickets to the Lakers, to the old Forum. Now, if anybody knew anything about the Forum, it was this small little arena that, it was like a sweat box. It was the hottest arena that you could ever go to, but it was the most fun because the Lakers were winning. And, and to go watch the Showtime team play, it was like, as a kid, there was nothing better.
Yeah, well, I can definitely draw a comparison to that, let alone as actually a Clippers fan, because for me and my dad, we have that very same kind of bond and experience.
Yeah, exactly.
For like the last few years, where it's like we always go to the games at Staples. We always have a blast, watching them at their best right now, at least. It's like there's nothing better than that, honestly.
It's great. It's great that the Clippers and the Lakers have an arena like Staples Center now.
Yeah,
can get a lot of people in there, and they can really showcase. And the fact that both the Lakers and the Clippers are legitimate basketball teams too.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, it's like that's the first time in history this has ever happened. So it's like,
exactly.
It makes it all the more fun.
Well, at least for the Clippers.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really for us. I mean, the Lakers, if they had it their way, they would never welcome that.
I know. Yeah, I know. It would be nice. Although I'm a Laker fan, it would be nice to see the Clippers win a world championship. And say, wow, we have two teams in LA who live in the same building who are
Right.
champs. You know, I don't think any other city can say that.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this too. I'll give the respect to you that you and all the Laker fans deserve, and say congratulations on your just won previous championship. You know, you guys deserved it. And well, as mad as I am, I respect all the hard work that went into that.
Yeah, you know, as a real Laker fan though, it's not really.
I know it never satisfies. Never satisfies.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and
I understand that myself too, because I like teams. It's, you know, it's not just the Clippers. I like teams that it's like they have that same standard. You know, it's like they're always. It's never enough for them. They're so good, used to being good. They just want to keep being good. You know.
Well, also for me, this is the first time where you don't have players who have been with the Lakers for a long time, who are Lakers that won a championship. Yeah. So let Anthony Davis and LeBron James win one more. Call them real Lakers.
Right. No. I mean, it's like I get where you're coming from with that, and you know, I would agree that's a good standard to hold them to.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and I guess I'll fire off a quick follow up in a sense that's related to all this. Is like, why were you drawn to a team like the Lakers, and like what players did you admire specifically? And just why was that the case, you know, aside from maybe the obvious factors? Like, is there anything more deeper with that?
Well, a couple things. Number one, because when you grow up in LA, and you have a team that already has a history, you're kind of just born into that history.
Of course.
You know, it's interesting because I'm originally from Newark, New Jersey, so all my family's back east.
Right.
I'm a diehard Yankee fan. Like, I would be owned by my family if I wasn't a Yankee fan.
Right.
I like the Dodgers. I grew up liking the Dodgers, but not as much as the Yankees, because I have familial roots with the Yankees as opposed to the Dodgers.
Right.
But when it came to the Lakers, I really became a Laker fan once Magic Johnson came there. I mean, you know, I followed him and his career at Michigan State because I'm a huge Big Ten fan. I have family that played played sports in the Big Ten.
Right.
So I just, you know, I'm a huge University of Michigan fan. I love everything Wolverines, go blue. So I've always watched the Big Ten.
It's weird you would fall in love with a player then who went to Michigan State.
I know, isn't it? Yeah. Isn't it? But only after he left Michigan State.
Right. Of course. That's how it always goes.
Yeah. Only after he left Michigan State. So I really became a huge fan of the Lakers once Magic Johnson went there. Now, before that, I was a huge Detroit Piston fan.
Oh, good choice, man. Now, and I know why. You know, it's like they were a total embodiment of just, you know, do the dirty work.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, and and then I became a huge fan of Isaiah Thomas.
Right.
Not a lot of people like Isaiah Thomas. He's had his issues in the past.
Right.
But you know, in terms of one of the first real small guards who were athletic, who could score, who could pass, who could lead a team.
Yeah, he was like the original Russell Westbrook, you know.
Yeah, exactly. He's like the original Russell Westbrook. Yeah, you know, he was explosive. He was a small guard, but he backed down from nobody. And that Isaiah Thomas, I kind of saw myself in him in terms of I was always not really the smaller person, but the smaller guard playing basketball. Right. I wasn't the biggest person. I always had to fight and scrap for everything I did on the basketball court. So I saw a lot of the things in myself in Isaiah Thomas.
Right.
And that's how I really became a fan of the Pistons because of Isaiah Thomas, also just because of who he is and his character. And also he's from the Big Ten, Indiana Hoosiers.
Yep. So. No. Yeah, well, I'll definitely say this too. I definitely base my game alone off of that now. And while granted, I do play as the true big, you know, because I am a good height and size compared to like other players at the same time, compared to most bigs, you know, I still am undersized and under strength. So it's like, to me, it's like I always have to do what Isaiah Thomas did when he was facing other guards, which is just take him down, you know?
And it's amazing also how the game has expanded because now players your size and your height are playing the point guard position.
Right. You know, yeah. No. Or, you know, it's like you're super tiny and you're grabbing like 10 rebounds a game.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just kind of interesting how the game has changed.
Right.
And there's so many different players that can do so many things across the board. You know, I look at someone like Zion Williamson, who just blows my mind.
Right.
You know, somebody who's 6'6", 280 pounds.
Right.
Jump 40 inches in the air. you know, and people just bounce off of him, you know, and it's just we used to think LeBron was the standard. Now we look at Zion Williamson and we're like, wow, that he's a beast.
Yeah.
You know?
No, totally. Yeah. It's like, I think that's kind of the beauty part in all this. It's like, you never know what's coming, but it's like what you do end up seeing is actually blows your mind, you know?
It is. It is. I think basketball is the one sport where it's such a team concept.
Right.
But individually,
right.
Your talent, your size, your athleticism, your intellect can really show on the court because there's only so many people on the court, and you can dictate what happens on the in a game as opposed to baseball or hockey or football where there's so many other players.
Right.
You know, I think basketball is that one sport where you can really show your individual athleticism.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely a lot easier to do that, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's like, to me, and it's weird, actually, I was having a conversation with my mom about this yesterday. I think in basketball, it's a lot easier to define who's truly great, whereas who's either not or a level below or whatever, because it's like at the end of the day, everybody has the same kind of job in that they need to do, which is, you know, to play defense, get stops, whatever, put the ball in the basket. You know, it's like, and while there are different ways they do that, at the same time, you know, at the end of the day, it does come down to just them overall and what they can do.
Yeah, exactly.
As themselves and as a collective. Yeah. Well, I guess I would definitely agree with all that. And I think it would help me lead into my next question too. And I guess I'll put two in one here in a way. What was like and I guess this is kind of a repeat, but you know, I'll see if I can get a different answer out of you. What was like your proudest moment in your own experience? And it doesn't have to necessarily be you playing the game, like watching something and, you know, I guess why. And then also it's like, did that lead or how did that lead into you getting more involved with sports that you still enjoy today? Like what appealed to them, you know? So I guess this kind of builds off of both questions I just asked, you know, what appeals to sports about you today that you took from growing up? And then just like, what was like a defining moment for you?
You know, there's a couple of them. I think the first defining moment for me was making my high school basketball team. I think
that's always so gratifying.
You know, I think for any high school kid, I don't care how good you are, making your high school basketball team kind of tells you as a teenager, I made it. I'm good enough to be on the same court with my peers.
Yeah. And I'll just interrupt you. It was interesting for me too, because I did not have that experience, that pleasure at first, because I remember I tried out my first 2 years of high school for the team and got denied, you know?
Yeah.
And that stunk, you know, it stunk. And so finally, when I transferred away and was able to make the team, you know, while it was practically a guarantee at the same time, because I had endured, you know, so much to get here, I was still so happy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think for me, it's interesting because my freshman year of high school, I considered myself a pretty good basketball player.
Right.
I didn't make the varsity team, and I really thought I was going to make the varsity team.
Right.
I was really upset with that because I thought I deserved to be on the varsity, you know, and you know, and I had some issues with the head coach at my high school.
Right.
You know, that's neither here nor there.
Yep.
So I didn't make the varsity until my sophomore year of high school. You know, once again, that still let me know that I was there.
Right.
That resentment from my freshman year kind of
Right.
spilled over, and I worked a little harder. I got a little better.
Right.
You know, and it made me realize that nothing is taken for granted, that you really have to work hard
Right.
for some of the things that you want to get, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of them. I think another one that really kind of motivated me more was when Zion came into my life, my nephew Zion.
Right.
I was able to coach him in basketball.
Right.
Watch him mature and learn the game. And I was able to instill some responsibility and goals into him.
Yep.
And just to watch him grow and become the person he is now,
right.
You know, that really helped me, that really inspired me to want to do more and work with kids more.
Right.
So I think those are two really big defining moments in my life.
Right. And I guess I would just build off that a little bit more. It's like, you know, those moments, you know, obviously, like you said, they've clearly had an impact on your life. How exactly did that get you more involved with sports? Like, what did you do building off of those moments to get more involved with it, basically? And again, I would just ask, why did you do that? Why did you feel this specifically mattered to you?
To me, it mattered because I wanted to make a difference, not just for myself, but for other people. And
Right.
I felt the one stamp I could leave on this world
Mm-hmm.
was to know that people would come back to me in the future and say, "Hey, Mr. James, MJ, I remember
Right.
when you coached me, and I remember some of the things that you used to say to me, and I'm telling those things to my children." And
Right.
for me, I guess that acknowledgement or those
Yeah.
accolades
Mm-hmm.
kind of made me want to get into the aspect of coaching and
Yeah.
and continuing to work with kids, work with organizations,
Right.
um, work with parents, do the mentoring that I did,
Right.
do the training that I've done. I think
Mm-hmm.
that really kind of motivated me and pushed me in that direction to work with the community and work with kids so that for future generations they
Right.
can kind of hand down some of the things that I taught their parents.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
it's funny me talking to you.
Right.
I hope someday when you have kids, you can
Right.
say, my coach Mathias used to say this to me when he was training me for basketball or volleyball, or
Right.
when he was
Yeah. No.
or when he was refereeing my games, he would give me
Right.
pointers and these little tips.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think that's just a big motivating factor for me. Being able to see the training and the coaching of the youth, and making
Right.
sure that they're on the right path, and making sure that I'm helping them be on the right path.
Yeah.
That's kind of something that holds dear to me. So
Yeah. No, and it's weird actually you brought that up, because you just remind me of a little side story I have for our audience. So while Matthias never coached me when I was playing basketball at the YMCA, he actually, for I think like a couple months or so, he actually like trained me to play volleyball a bit, actually. And I remember, it was like, because like I said, we had never really trained one-on-one or coached, because the opportunity never came, because I was always with my dad.
yeah,
But it's like, I remember doing that, and at the time I didn't know much about volleyball, but I really wanted to get into it. So, and I just remember training with you, and I just remember how much fun I had, and how you gave me some really good like pointers on how to do it. And I mean, nowadays it's like I have a lot of that to thank for you, because I mean,
I
it's like,
appreciate that, man. I really
yeah, no, I
appreciate
mean,
that.
you can be the judge, but it's like I definitely feel, thanks to some of those sessions, I've gotten a lot better on my volleyball skills.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
funny. On a side note, basketball was my sport. Basketball, and track. I ran
right,
track. Now, volleyball. What's interesting was I played volleyball when I was younger, like in middle
right,
school. I didn't really play like big time organized volleyball, but I
right,
played volleyball. So I thought about playing volleyball in high school, but I wasn't sure.
right,
Once again, if I was with volleyball, I wasn't sure if I was good enough.
right.
My freshman year of high school, we're doing practice, we're doing layup drills for my
Mhm.
basketball team,
Yep.
and we're doing dunk drills. And in high school, I could dunk the ball, so
Right.
I'm dunking the basketball. The coach of the volleyball team would always come watch the basketball team practice.
Right.
So my coach Newman, Coach Randy Newman,
Uh-huh.
he's like this really famous coach. He's like one of the most famous coaches in California. He'd already won
Right.
all these championships at University High School.
Yep.
He was already in the Hall of Fame for high school volleyball coaches. He saw me doing the layup drills and jumping in the air.
Right.
So he came to me after practice and he said, "You ever thought about playing volleyball?"
Right.
Now, I didn't tell him I knew how to play volleyball.
Right.
So so he's like, you should come try out for the team. I said, "Sure, I'll come try out for the team."
Right.
Came the next morning, tried out for the team. I'm spiking the ball, I'm jumping over the net, spiking the ball. He's like, "How come you didn't tell me you played volleyball?" I was like, "You didn't ask. You
You
never
knew.
asked me."
You just knew.
Yeah. So
It's like you
that
could
year,
tell.
my freshman year, that was '87. Me and another freshman. There were only two freshmen on the varsity team. I made
Right.
varsity volleyball. That's funny. I made the
Yeah.
varsity volleyball team. I didn't make the varsity basketball team.
Right.
And me and this other kid named Colin, we were the only two freshmen on the varsity team. We didn't
Mhm.
get much time
Right.
because every
You know.
single starter on our volleyball team was going to like a big time university. They were all
Right.
getting scholarships.
Right.
But my freshman year, we wound
Mhm.
up beating Granada Hills for a city championship. We played at Pepperdine in front of a huge crowd. It was phenomenal. It was one of the greatest experiences. And then that kept me playing volleyball while I was playing basketball all my years in high school. So, you know, it was great. And when I was doing that, I was also playing AAU tournaments during the summertime for volleyball. And then I would switch over and then play an AAU tournament for basketball. So during the summer times in high school, I was pretty much not home much.
Well, I mean, it's like if you're having fun, it's like you don't care, man. It's
no. When you're a kid and you're that age, man, you're that's all you want to do is play. That's all you want to do is play. You know, so it was a lot of fun. It was great experiences. I mean, I had a chance to go to New Mexico. I had a chance to go to Colorado.
There you go.
I had a chance to go to Florida and play in these tournaments. And the only way I would have been able to do that is if I was playing these sports. You know, so
absolutely, man. So, you know, I mean, that sounds so much fun. So I can only feel jealous and feel happy for you at the same time. So
thank you. Don't be jealous. I wish I could have done more with that. So
it's like whatever. All right, well, cool. So I think after that, I actually have a little surprise for you. But before I give that away, I want to give a shout out to one of our sponsors.
Do you own a classic Mustang, Corvette, Camaro, or Chevelle from the 1960s or 70s? Does the clock in your dash keep accurate time? Do you want to get a new clock for your car, but you don't want to pay $200, $300, or even $500 for a new clock? Well, then go to ImpactAutoPartsStore.com for a brand new quartz clock that looks identical to the original and is powered by a single AA battery. All at prices less than half that of a restored clock or a reproduction. Go to the website, ImpactAutoPartsStore.com, and keep on cruising.
And so with that, I think I want to talk a little more specifically, still about your background, but more specifically about what you did in the Santa Monica YMCA Basketball League. And I guess for my audience, I'll riff here a little bit just to give them some context. So for me, like I said, I played in this league for 7 years, and I was with it from the very beginning too. And by the time, you know, I left, nobody else had ever been there for like more than a couple of years. So it's like, for me, it was kind of deeply personal in a sense, because for me, it had always been my safe haven. It had always been my place to go to feel happy or sad or anything, really. You know, it's like at the end of the day, it was always a good place to go to learn something, to experience something.
I feel the same way, definitely.
It was always something you never forget, something you treasure. It was like anything, you know. I loved going to play. I loved going to hang out with guys like you and Pete all the time. You know, that was always fun. And it was just like, it was something, you know, I'll hold dear forever. And I, you know, feel great about every day. And so I guess before I ask you some specific questions on what you took away from that, I actually reached out to Peter, who, let me remind everybody, directed this league. And he sent back actually a little message about you. And I'd like to read what he said. So this is Pete's words. Quote, "I met Mathias when I started at the Santa Monica YMCA in 2011. Whenever a referee would fail to show up, Mathias would always fill the empty spot. And he was always looking for ways to help the kids, parents, and our league be as good as it could be. Over the years, he not only moved into coaching, but he also became a valuable assistant who knew exactly how things ran and how to act as my voice whenever I was not in the office. Mathias loves the game of basketball and was and still is a pretty good player himself. He loves to teach and coach the game. Like all of us, he has learned new roles and gotten better at them over time. As a coach, he has learned the value in shouting praise and whispering criticism to his players, which made him much better over time. Not everyone gets to see the full version of Mathias, but for those who take the time to get to know him, he has been a warm and good friend."
Excellent.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I'll have to call him and thank him personally.
Yeah. Well, I'll certainly try and bring that up when I do end up bringing him on the show. So, and I'm sure it's like he'll say, "Oh, you know, it's like, this is so true in every way." So I guess, you know, going off of those words from Pete right there, who, you know, was the one who ran all this and did it so well, you know, how did you first get involved with this league? Because it's like, you know, obviously Pete was number one, but it seems like for most of the time when he was running it, you were number two. So it's like, what got you to that position, and why did you stay with it, you know, for so many years at the same time?
I stayed with it because once again, there's a sense of community, there's a sense of love, there's a sense of camaraderie, not just among the kids and the coaches, but among the parents.
Right.
Everybody did their part to make sure everything ran smoothly. I think we did one of the best jobs you could ever do, not only at any YMCA, but for any youth organization anywhere. The job that we did. I mean, you're a spitting example of that in terms of when we first started out, like you said, there were only 4 teams.
Yeah.
By the time Peter and I left, we had over 30 teams and 300 kids.
Yep.
I mean, and it just, the league grew exponentially because people like Peter and you and your dad and me and Zion and so many other parents in the communities saw the potential of what this league could do. And I think for me, it was a no-brainer. Every day that I was there, every day that I worked with Peter, every day that I was exposed to him and the knowledge of wealth that he was and the experiences that he had and everything that he had done in his career. Anybody who's never studied on Peter Arbogast, I suggest you do that, because that man is a walking almanac when it comes to sports.
And a lot of people, I'm sure, in our audience and just overall, they do know him. So it's I think for them to hear this, it's like it just speaks to how much people like us who know him personally do actually treasure him, for who he is and not what he does.
And I think also, it's funny, you're never too old to change or to adapt or to learn. And for me, even though I had done a lot and learned a lot and been a lot of places, I found a mentor in Peter. I thought I knew everything, but I obviously I did not. And for me, it was just to be able to be in that atmosphere, to be with that program, to be around those kids, you guys, to be around those parents, to be a part of the community. There was nothing greater for me.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, and again, I'm the person who can clarify all this. What you're saying is absolutely true, not only from your perspective, but from mine. And I mean, I would argue mine's truly unique because it's like I never even got to know you on the deeper level that a lot of your players knew you, because it's like I was never on your teams. I was never like at your side in any of this. I just always saw you as a person who was there. And honestly, I think the consistency of that, grew over time. And it's like that had a greater impact on me as time went by. So obviously I'm sure for our audience, they already know you coached for a lot of those years. You were very involved with this league, but I guess going back to coaching, as a young player, for me, one thing that I noticed about your style, because again, you coached a lot and I was always on the opposition. So I was always, noticing things over the course of time that you constantly did. And one of those things, and I'm sure you will happily acknowledge this because you did it pretty much every game, was that you were almost always really fast, very early in the game and calling your timeouts. Like in like the first 2 minutes of the game, you would just start shouting. It's like, get down there, get over here. It's like, it was just like the first 2 minutes, you were pretty much out of breath, it seemed. Like, right after that, you would just call timeout, like before anybody else was even thinking about that, including myself. I was like, why is he calling timeouts? It's like, yes, they're making some mistakes, but it's like, I don't think it's worth wasting your timeouts so fast. And while that might have been true, at the same time, I think in a way it was what made you such a good coach, because it's like you were able to change these tiny little mistakes your team was making early before they became bigger problems.
Yes.
And honestly, you're not alone in this. I'd just like to point out that, at least to me and to a lot of people, I'm sure, two of the greatest coaches today, that both in today's NBA and probably will be in history, Greg Popovich and Brad Stevens.
Oh yeah.
They follow that exact same trend where it's like, they'll see, mistakes being made early in the first 2 minutes that they don't like. And while most coaches would let that go, they just simply don't. They're just like, they call a timeout and they're like, hey, let's fix these now before they become a bigger problem for us. And, so it's like, while granted, many of us, including myself, didn't necessarily agree with that style, I just want to point out you're actually in pretty good company. So I'll applaud you for like ignoring all the critics that there were and just doing what you had to do.
Well, it's funny. Usually when I would call a quick timeout, I would go into a basketball game with my team with a certain game plan and a certain way that I would want them to do certain things within the first couple of minutes of the game that would establish how we would play for the rest of the game.
Right.
So when I saw something that they quickly deviated from, even though we might have worked on it all week,
right,
I would be quick to say, we got to bring it in before we get away from what we're trying to do.
right.
And that's one of the main reasons why I would call a quick timeout. Only if I saw that where we were going was not where I wanted to head.
Right.
So
yeah,
that's one of the reasons why I would call quick timeouts and just kind of get their heads back together and say, wait a minute, this isn't what we worked on. Let's get back to what we worked on. Let's get back to how we practiced before we get away from that and the game gets away from us.
Yeah, no. I mean, obviously in the moment, it doesn't seem like that's the kind of thing you need to be reminded of, but as a coach, it's like those are the things you do see and you need to remind your players of that. And I think that's very important. And one of the most important reasons why, coaches are there. It's like they're there to remind their players of what's important and what they need to do, even when it seems like they shouldn't be doing that to the players,
Well, yeah, and exactly.
It's the fact of the matter too. Coaches are not players. They think differently than them.
Yeah, true. And it would be different also if it was high school kids that I was working with.
Right.
They can retain a little bit more information.
Right.
So when you're dealing with kids, you want to just call a timeout, bring them back in real quick and say, hey, this is what we worked on. Let's get back to what we worked on.
Right.
I can have fun. So
yeah. No, and it's interesting for me because I remember as somebody who's autistic, I like to stare off sometimes. And I remember during those early timeouts that you called, it's like, while my dad was talking over a game plan as the coach, I would still casually turn my eye and look to what you were doing. I was just naturally curious. I was like, you're calling a timeout so early. What do you have to say to them?
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't pick up anything because I was far away. It's just like I looked at your little movements and stuff, and it was just like,
He's saying something.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just like it always caught my eye every time. And it's weird. I have clear memories of like, playing games where you were coaching against us, and it's like 2 minutes in, it's like you're already screaming, you're already calling timeout, and I'm like, okay,
Well, that also helped, but also because your dad was such a good coach and you always had good teams too.
Right.
And your teams and my teams always wound up
playing. Right. We were actually, we became kind of friendly rivals over the course of time. We were always just playing each other. And honestly, I like that, I like that spirit of competition. And it's weird too, because I have another gift to give you here, which is that my dad, who, like I mentioned, was usually my coach over many of the years I was at the Y. And as a result, he was always coaching against you. He actually had some comments to make too about you. And I'll quote, Mathias and I coached against each other a lot. And our different coaching styles meant that we didn't always see eye to eye. But there were 3 things I always noted and respected about Mathias. First, he knew the game of basketball inside and out. Second, he really cared about and would do anything for the YMCA and the basketball program. And then lastly, he loved his nephew Zion and helped raise him to be an amazing young man. So even if Mathias and I didn't always see eye to eye when we coached each other, I always had tremendous respect for who he was and is today.
Wow. Thank you. Tell him thank you very much. I
will absolutely tell him that, and again, he, like Pete, he means this, I do feel, because it's like, I mean it too. It's like, I felt the same way, playing against your teams. It's like, I could just see, what they saw in you at the same time.
Yeah. I love that, man. Your dad's a good man. He's done a lot. He's done a lot for the community also. And
right.
And,
I guess I'll just bring up the fact, one of the few things you, me, and my dad all share in common, actually, when we, in regards to that league, is we're all members of that Hall of Fame. It's not just you, it's me and my dad, and we were all inducted at the same time, no less.
Yeah.
I remember that ceremony we all had for our induction, and actually, I actually have something to show as a little recollection, both for our audience and from that. And that is, if I can just pull it out, this.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
that is a great picture.
Yep. Yeah, no, this was, I'm not sure if this was actually from the ceremony or when we were finished. It might have been when we were finished, although I know for a fact.
I think that might have been when we were finished. That's a great picture.
But actually, I actually still do have a picture of the actual ceremony, and this is it.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
That is beautiful, man.
That's you, nice. Me, and my dad were just standing side by side holding the plaques.
That's the short Keegan right there.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But, it's like at the same time, I still love looking back on that thing. And I'll actually do a stigma for our audience here. The guy who was standing next to me in that picture, if you go back and look, that's Pete right there standing next to me. And then the guy next to him is actually a guy named Steve, who was another great coach, who I was actually had the privilege of being coached by a couple of times. And yeah, he was really good too.
Yeah, Steve is is coaching the girls basketball team at
Yes, he is. He is coaching. He's also doing coaching himself too, still today for high school, no less.
Yeah. I was also gonna say, you know, I really respect and thank your dad for all the things that he did for Zion and all the coaching.
Yeah, no, because that's the other thing too. Well, I was never coached by you. My dad did coach him a couple of times when we were on the same team together during the summer.
And your dad was a great mentor to him also. So like I said, it takes a community. It really takes everyone to put their little to chip in and put their little piece in to make sure everything fits in just right. So
yeah. And in all honesty too, I mean, it's like I loved playing rec league and playing against you, but actually I think some of my favorite moments as being a part of that league were when we all got together during the summertime to play as a collective team.
Yeah.
You know, I think that was one of my favorite experiences just because it's like it was no longer, you know, friendly competition. It's like we were all one unit, you know, and it's like I think all that togetherness, you know, really had an impact on me and made me want to play better and just be a better teammate too, and have a lot more fun at the same time. You know,
that's what it's all about. It's about being a good teammate and having fun.
Yeah.
You know, number one, have fun. You want to win. You always want to win, but if you're not having fun doing it, then there's no point in doing it.
Yeah. And it was nice too for me because I did actually, it was a case where I was always on my dad's team and Zion was always on your team. So that was one of the few times I also got to be his teammate for once.
Yeah.
And it was interesting too, because, you know, along with you and my dad being coaching rivals, me and Zion were kind of personal rivals because we were usually the two biggest guys on the court.
Yeah.
We were always going against each other at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, that kid always fought. You know, I was kind of amazed. He was always like the one kid who could always get not into my head, but just like take me down a peg at the same time.
Yeah, he's tenacious. He's tenacious. He's a strong kid, man.
Yeah.
He's a strong kid. You know,
he was one of the few who was actually stronger than me. And I was like, what is this kid hiding? You know,
it is no surprise he got into football.
For our audience, I'll let them know now. He's a football player now, so, and a good one apparently too. So I have a lot of respect for him as well, and we will definitely learn more about his story when we get the chance. And I guess I'll just fire off another quick question here, going back to that Hall of Fame induction. What did that mean to you when that happened, basically? Because as it stands right now, while this is a rare situation where we have a lot of people at once who we know that are a part of that Hall of Fame, you know, it's like there still aren't many people overall who are a part of that. So what did that mean to you specifically to be a part of that small group that just happens to include me, you, and my dad?
Oh, I mean, wow. Well, where do I begin? I mean, number one, it like I was saying, when I made my high school basketball team, it made me realize that I had arrived, that everything that I had done up until that point was acknowledged, and that people really appreciated and understood what I did and the sacrifices I made in order to enrich other people's lives, because it wasn't about me, you know. Like I said, it was about the kids, and it's about the parents, and it's about the community. You know, I mean, I could go through life getting no awards whatsoever, as long as people came back to me and said, we appreciate what you've done. And
I had sort of the same takeaway from that too, because, you know, yes, I was a player, so I was more subject to these, but at the same time, I wasn't really so much of a standout guy, you know, like when playing. It's like, yes, I was good, but I was never like really, really good, like enough to earn like accolades or acknowledgement in a way that was, you know, only consistent, you know. So it's like to actually finally get that special thing that told me, it's like, hey, you know, it's like you matter, you know, it's you did something important, you know, even if maybe it didn't show so much in the short term. It's like over the course of time, it becomes really clear that what you did has had an impact.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think, that was very special. And I can see you had the same thought when that happened.
You know, and another thing for me also, Keegan, is like, you know, every year when we would have the banquets at the end of the year, when we get all the teams and all the kids and all the parents together, you know, at the end of the year, when all these parents would come up to me and say, thank you so much for what you did for my child. My child is is a much better basketball player and a much better person because of you.
Right.
That's the Hall of Fame for me.
Yeah.
That's something that I can never, that's something that I can never lose. That'll always be with me. When a parent comes up to me and says, wow, what you just did for my kid this season, how you mentored him or her, what you taught him or her, for me, that acknowledgement and that thankfulness from the parents is all I need to hear.
Yeah, no. And as a player too, I felt the same way when playing with other guys who I really respected and not. And I guess I'll kind of slightly build off of that in a way, again, rather quickly. But when you were coaching specifically, what were necessarily the things you looked for in like your players and like and your coaching style? What did you want to achieve when you were doing something like that, and how did maybe it change too, because it's like you said, you're never too old to change. So it's
there's three things that I really look for. In terms of a player, the three things I look for is teamwork.
Right.
You have to be able to.
That's very important.
You have to be able to trust your teammates. I don't care how good you are or how bad you are.
Yep.
I want you to understand, if you're the best player on my team, you have to trust the worst player on your team.
Right.
Not that anybody on my team would ever think that they're the worst player, because that's not how I coach. Everyone on my teams are on equal footing.
Right.
But you had to trust your teammates, and that's just teamwork, period. Number two is just working hard.
Right.
If you see someone on your team not working as hard as you, I'm going to leave it up to you to go and say something to your teammate. That's something that I think Zion, when he played for me, was always good at. That's why he was always my captain, because Zion has such a good disposition about himself, and he was such a good person that he would come to his teammates and say, listen, you're not doing this a certain way. This is the way that we want you to do this. Right. And I need you to work just a little harder because your other teammates are working just as hard, And I think when as a coach, when you leave it upon yourself to let the players do the coaching on the side and not come to those players and have to say something, when your peers can come to you on your own team and say, listen, this is what we need to work on. I think for me, that's really gratifying in itself, because then you give a sense of responsibility and a sense of ownership to your players.
Absolutely.
And number three, just having fun. You got to have fun. Sometimes I could be very passionate, but at the end of the day, my players know they have to have fun, because if you're not having fun, then you're not going to play hard.
Yeah. No.
Having fun and playing hard, they go hand in hand.
Yeah, no. And it's weird for those watching who watched my first episode when I interviewed my baseball coach, David Harris. He had 6 rules when it came to playing baseball, and I'll quickly rule off them. Well, I won't actually say them, but the most notable standout of those rules were 1 and 6. And ironically, they were both the same, which is have fun. Yeah. And that just stresses how important it is whenever you're playing a sport of any kind, whether it's basketball or baseball. It's like having fun is the most important thing there is.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
You don't have to have a smile on your face while you're playing the game.
Right.
But at the end of the day, did you have fun?
Right. Yeah, no. Well, I always had fun when I was able to play, and I'm sure Zion did too. So it's like,
I'm sure there were a few times he didn't have fun because I got in the face. But
I mean, obviously, of course, you can't always have fun. It's like, that's a little insane. But at the same time, if you're having fun most of the time, especially when you've been in one place for so long, I think that's a win.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I totally agree with that.
Right. Well, I think we should actually start to kind of develop more into the uniqueness of this podcast, which is talking about, coaching or playing with kids who are on the spectrum or being on the spectrum yourself. But I think before we do that, I'm going to give a shout out to another one of our sponsors.
Are you looking to boost your SAT score by at least 360 points? Whether your goal is the SAT, ACT, AP classes, or general test preparation, turn to Sam's Tutoring Company. Sam is a Caltech educated tutor with over 17 years of experience teaching over 700 students of all ages. Whether you want to learn in person or remotely, Sam is ready to help you accomplish your academic goals. Call Sam's Tutoring Company. If you mention the promo code SportsSpectrum, you'll receive 25% off the price of your first session.
All right. And so with that now, I think we should develop into what I said earlier, which is the spectrum aspect of all these sports that you've endured and coached and played. And I kind of want to start off with sort of, it's not stereotypical, but it's a question like a lot of people get asked and have a lot of different responses to, or at least this covers a term that a lot of people hear and have a lot of different responses to. So when you hear the term mental health, which I'm sure you've heard a lot of times, or know a lot of people have heard that term themselves and reacted differently, what exactly pops into your head when you hear that term mental health? And what does it mean to you, I guess, too?
The term mental health, something that pops in my head is people in need of help.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say people in need of help, I mean, there's so many different aspects of mental health.
Right.
So many different ways that someone can go through issues of mental health,
mm-hmm.
whether it be autism or depression,
right.
or having a child who's ADHD.
Right.
So many times, especially in this society, we equate mental health with people who are crazy, and that's just
right.
That's beyond the pale. That has nothing to do with someone who's crazy. It has to be someone who's not firing on all cylinders.
Right.
They just need that little extra help to understand how to live in society.
Right.
So
yeah.
For me, whenever I hear mental health, it just means that it means for me that I have to be more diligent about the people that I'm talking to or that I'm talking to. So that's what mental health means to me. And it's
yeah, no. And I mean, honestly, this is a question where I truly think there are wrong answers. I'll put it that way, but there's not necessarily one right answer. It's like, there are a lot of ways to put this in a good way. So it's like, but yours definitely applies in a lot of ways. So
you probably never get the same answer from anyone when you
ask. Exactly. And that's the reason I asked this question so many times. It's like, what does this mean to you? Because I don't think I'm going to get the same answer, multiple times. So it's like, I want to know what each person thinks when they hear that. And so I guess, again, going more into that aspect of it, when obviously the reason I brought you on is because I know for a fact you've interacted with a lot of both kids and adults who are athletes or parents or whatever, who are on the spectrum or maybe on the spectrum or exhibit behavior that suggests they're on the spectrum. And again, obviously this is supported by the fact that you coached at a school in New Roads that has a program that specifically focuses on kids like that and, otherwise. And, it's again, just your vast experience, it's like I'm sure you've interacted with people like that. And so basically it's like, I guess the question itself is, for somebody like you, how often did you come across people like that? And, it's like, what necessarily stuck out to you about them, and why was that the case when you ran into people like this or who had these behaviors or whatever?
That's a really interesting question, Keegan. For the most part, for a good 20 years, I would meet people who were either ADHD, ADD, or autistic on a daily basis because of what I did for a living.
Right.
It just came with the territory.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that I worked in programs that specialized in autistic kids and ADHD and kids with ADHD. It's something that I looked forward to doing because I felt I had a better understanding in the coaching aspect of it more than
and even like the refereeing aspect, because it's like you had to referee kids like me who were on the spectrum. And it's like we often, maybe looked at you differently or just like reacted differently to bad calls or whatever. And it's like, you had to deal with that. So it's
I had to learn and understand there are certain temperaments that certain people have. And, you have to deal with everyone on a very individualistic basis.
Mm-hmm.
When you're on a spectrum, you have to deal with them on an even more individualistic basis.
Right.
There are certain things that they may not understand that so-called quote unquote normal people in society would understand.
Right.
And I think for me, also raising a child who was on that spectrum too, gave me much better insight.
Absolutely. It's like if you connect with somebody personally who has to deal with something like that, it definitely helps you when dealing with others who maybe don't have that connection,
I think also, like I said, the coaching and mentoring aspect of it, as opposed to the clinical side of it are so different. The interactions are so different, because on the one hand, when you're coaching someone, you're trying to nurture them and raise them into this individual, and you're trying to teach them these skills.
Right.
You know, and you have to have a certain clinical understanding and background at the same time while you're coaching them. So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Yep.
You know, so I think it's even harder for someone who's coaching those kids, because you don't have them in a doctor's office working with them one-on-one. Lots of times you have them in a team concept, and you still have to deal with them as an individual while still coaching them within a team concept.
Right.
You know, and
and I guess I would build off of that in a way. It's like when you interacted with these kinds of people, you know, kids, adults, athletes, whatever, again, you know, what did you ever make specific adjustments and in how you interacted with them, or how you coached them, refereed them, whatever? And why did you feel you need to do that, basically?
Oh, all the time. I mean, you have to, because once again, you have to deal with them on so much more of an individualistic aspect. I'll give you an example. A lot of adjustments I would make. I used to, and this is going away from basketball, but I used to, I used to be a swim instructor and a lifeguard at the YMCA.
Yes, I remember that.
And I would get a lot of my kids that I would train were autistic.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the first things that I would do is I would just kind of let the child kind of swim around, play around with me, just to get a sense of what they liked or disliked. No words would be said. I would just kind of watch and observe them.
Right.
While I'm watching and observing them, I would talk to their parents on the side and say, you know, what does he or she like? What does he or she not like?
Right.
You know, what are certain hand movements or gestures I can make to get the child to understand what I'm trying to do? What are some trigger words that I can or can't say to your child that I can get on the same page with? So these are things that I would find out from the parents before I even worked with the child.
Right.
That these are things that the parent knows so much more about the child than I would, that would give me a better understanding of working with that child. So
yeah. And I guess you know, I'm sure, like, for the parents, that was an experience in themselves, having to talk to somebody who didn't know what their kid had to deal with, and trying to give as much information to somebody like you as they could, so that you could understand them. But I guess for you, because we've already mentioned, you know, your nephew's on, he has ADHD, you know, it's like having somebody like him that you know personally, who, you know, has been diagnosed with this and has to deal with it every day. It's like, what effect does that have on you and anybody else you know personally who might have to deal with something like that?
Oh, I can tell you this much. It when he was, I'd say from the age of 2 to about 6, it really tested my patience. Mainly because, as you know, his attention level was just off the charts in terms of not being there sometimes. You know, it's funny that you mentioned staring off into the distance. Not that he would do that, but he would lose interest in things very quickly. He would get bored very quickly. And we really had to learn how to be really patient with him, and kind of wait for him to and understand that this is something he's going through, and we can't be upset with him because of the fact that it's not his fault. You know, for a good while, Zion, once again, beautiful kid, nicest kid in the world. He's genuine. He's if
super
you're a parent
nice.
who met him, he's the most genuine, nicest, most respected.
Total agreement.
Now, around me or his grandmother, he would get a little temper tantrum every once in a while. You know, he would get upset very quickly. You know, and once again, it was because the ADHD. His frustration level was a little higher than some other quote unquote normal people's was.
And I experienced this myself as somebody with autism too. It's shared, I'm sure, by a lot of people who are on the spectrum. You know, it's just a common thing where it's like they interact differently with people they know personally as compared to those they don't. You know, like, for example, I have trouble making eye eye contact a lot of times with people I don't know. Like I do it easy peasy with my parents and, my family and close friends and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's like when I'm talking to somebody randomly, it's like, I don't know why. I just don't want to give them the comfort of seeing my eyes when I'm talking to them,
And it's just that level of comfortability that we all understand.
Right.
And, but, as a parent, you really had to kind of just zone yourself in and put yourself on his level and say, okay, wow, this is what he's going through right now.
Yeah.
Let's figure out together what we need to do to make sure he feels comfortable and make sure that he understands that we're here with him. We're not working against him, that we're doing everything we can to work with him. And if he's frustrated, then let's find out what's making him even more frustrated and figure out a path together with him to understand why he feels that way.
Yeah. And I guess this is a good moment to try and put the sports and the spectrum aspect together. And that's by asking you this simple question, basically, which is that how did sports specifically help you deal with, interact with somebody like Zion who has ADHD or anybody else who, is on the spectrum and stuff? Like, how did sports make a difference when interacting with people like that? And also just help you better understand what they were going through, basically.
Sports help make a difference because, number one, as I said, the patience level.
Right.
It taught me so much a better understanding of the patience level in terms of interacting with not only kids, but with parents.
Right.
Of kids who are autistic.
Right.
Or of kids who have ADHD or ADD.
Right.
Number one, first and foremost. Number two, it taught me that it doesn't matter where you are.
Right.
That kid is having fun learning how to play a game that kid loves to play.
Right.
It doesn't matter what spectrum you're on.
Right.
Yeah, I really
definitely draw a comparison to that myself.
Yeah, I really learned that once I put a kid in a situation with other kids, once they were having fun and learning, and once they were finding out that they were having fun and learning while they were having fun playing a game, it was the best thing in the world.
Absolutely. It's like there's no better feeling you have in those kinds of moments where it's like everything just comes together so perfectly.
Yeah, and like I said, I would even give some of my kids in that position leadership roles.
Right.
And it really made them feel a sense of empowerment. To let them feel like, whoa, I'm not any different from anybody else. I can do the same things anybody else can.
Right.
I can be a leader. I can tell other people how to do certain things.
Yeah.
Once I've learned how to do them myself, I'm no different. And
the other thing too is, like they find something they're good at too.
Exactly.
It's like, and that builds up confidence.
You're a perfect example of that.
Right.
One of these days, you're going to be a great leader. You're very mature. You have a good handle on things, and it's just like I see a lot of that in you in terms of in terms
and
of.
I greatly appreciate that. Despite the fact that I've gotten this compliment plenty of times. It's like
so.
That's like absolutely, man.
That's definitely where I think specifically for me that it really enriched me and enriched my life to see these kids having fun and learning and then finding out they can do that same thing too.
Right. So absolutely, man. It's like I've met a lot of people too who say to me, it's like they get the same thing from seeing me play or from seeing people they know play. It's like
it's inspiring. It's inspiring. It's literally it's inspiring, man. So
right. Yeah. No. All right. Well, we've had a lot of fun, and I think this is a good question to close with here.
What are you taking off the podcast already? You don't love me anymore? I'm just kidding, man.
Yeah, no. I love you, man. It's like I wish we could have more time, but it's like anything else. All good things must come to an end. But I think I've got a good final question here that kind of summarizes everything we've talked about, or really connects with our audience the most by this point. Given everything we've talked about with them, and that's that. Obviously, we've over the course of time, a lot of progress has been made about dealing with people who have mental health issues and whatever, and deal with autism and ADHD and whatever, and people have gotten a lot better about dealing with these kinds of issues, I'm sure if like I'd grown up like 20 years ago, it would have been a lot more difficult than it is now. And I'm sure if I had been born 20 years later, it would be a lot easier at the same time. But obviously, even with progress, there's always still a stigma that never goes away of people who don't, get this, or they have a hard time understanding it or whatever, and it's like maybe they want to help, but they just don't know how. Yeah. And I guess, given your experience in all of this, certainly more than the average person, who would be listening to this, what's the number one thing out of everything you've said that you want people to know from your experiences with everything you've had to go through, about dealing with people with mental health and just dealing with the issue in general? It's like, what should they understand about it more, or just appreciate about it more? It's like, what do you think is that big defining thing, or maybe a couple of things?
The one thing that I used to tell people, myself personally, I would tell them, if you don't understand, go and find out. Because when people don't understand,
right,
they assume
wrong
things about other people.
Right.
And you don't want to assume, because every day we're still learning new things about mental health.
Right. And I mean, and that's kind of the whole point of having this episode with you right here. It's like, I'm trying to get people to know more about this, to understand more.
And the one thing I would always tell people who would just have these stereotypes or these stigmatisms about what it is that people go through when they have mental health issues, go and research, man. Right. Go talk to someone who actually has mental health issues and find out from them personally what they're going through. Right. Go volunteer.
Right.
There's so many different ways that you can learn yourself without assuming that you know.
Right.
Because we don't know everything. No one knows.
No, nobody does.
And the best thing that you can do as an individual is, if you don't understand, go and find out for yourself. Go volunteer.
And the other thing too, I would just say, is that I think there are plenty of people in this world who don't even realize they've got a problem that they don't even know about.
That is so true. That is so true. That is so true.
Which is why your advice is so critical. It's like, not only should you go out to learn more about others, you could end up learning more about yourself at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. I've actually started working with this volunteer organization that mentors homeless people. Oh. And the amount of mental health issues that are going on right now in the homeless
I mean, crazy. Again, I think just like with people who actually deal with these and have somewhat normal lives, those who are homeless, they shouldn't be exempt just because they're homeless. It's like they still have these issues, and it's like they should be treated accordingly,
Yeah.
And so I think
the biggest thing is, when it comes to something like that, ignorance is not bliss.
No.
You have no right to be ignorant if you don't understand what's going on.
Right.
You take the time to find out.
Right.
There are people out there, there are organizations out there that you can learn from. There are individuals out there who you can speak to, who will let you know through their own experiences that you're going through, and how they feel, and how society is treating them. And then once you find out, ask yourself, have I been doing everything I can?
Right.
So
yeah. No. Listen, I agree with all that. And I definitely think for our audience, it's like they could learn a lot from the simplicity, but also the complexity of what you're saying. It's like, the fact of the matter is, it's like we think we do a lot, but in reality, there's so much more we can do. And basically we get the push to do it, or find the reason to do it, and as simple or as complex as it may be, from just doing something like this, or listening to something like this.
Exactly. And for me, which is this is phenomenal for and I'm honored for you to want to talk to me about these issues. And for me, one of my outlets was to coach and to
there you go.
Let people who were going through mental health issues, especially kids who are going through mental health issues.
And that's just so like, that just shows just how much sports itself can have an impact on these kinds of people. It's like, it's like sports means so many things to so many people, but I really feel for people who are on the spectrum specifically, sports has a completely different meaning that not a lot of people realize,
It's a way of feeling it's a way of it's a way of feeling that you're part of something.
Yep. Yeah, no.
And that's the one thing that everyone in this world wants to feel, is a part of something.
Of course. Yeah, no, it's like, I think for me, it was like, that was kind of, again, one of the big reasons why I fell so in love with it, was it's like, I did feel like a part of something.
Definitely, man. Definitely. And I'm going to keep on doing it.
Yep. And the same with me too. It's like, it's like my life's going to go on as however it is. And so is your life. But I always think like, we're always going to come back to sports in some way, shape or form at the end of the day, and realize and appreciate just how important it is for us.
Definitely.
And I think a lot of our audience will too. It's like, if they have the same kind of experience, and just like, it's like, if they realize just how much sports might mean to them, especially during a time like this, where it's like, it's been practically taken away from us in almost every way possible.
Yeah.
Like, they can take so much more away from it when it comes back. It's like, it's unbelievable how much you can suddenly realize just out of one little thing.
Yeah. I think once we get back away from this new norm,
right.
I think a lot of people, like I said, will not have taken so many things for granted.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that will definitely be one of the defining things to come away from everything that's been going on in recent history.
Yeah.
And I think it will just be I think it's honestly going to be a real blessing once this is all over, to see the impact it's going to have on this specific field of dealing with people who are on the spectrum, or being somebody on the spectrum and playing sports and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I do too.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, I had a great time with you today. I'm sure our audience did too. You're an amazing person. You were an amazing guest today. And, it's like, you're going to keep doing great work regarding dealing with kids who are trying to play sports on the spectrum, or dealing as a coach, whatever. It's like, whatever you do, man, you're great at it, and you always have a positive impact, no matter how hard or how little you'll try. And it's like, just thank you for everything you've done for me and for, our audience today, and anybody else who's out there who feels that you made an impact on their life. Thank you. And, you've been a great guest today. And yeah, no, it's like, gosh, I don't even know how to close this. It's like,
hey, listen, how about this? I'll close it. You keep on doing what you're doing, because what you're doing right now is great. Yep. This is going to impact a lot of people in the future, man. So just be yourself and keep doing this, because this is such a positive thing that you're doing right now. People.
Yeah.
All right. So
yeah, you could not have closed that better for me. I appreciate you taking over there, man. But it's like, you stay well, man. You keep doing the great things that you do, man. And it's like, I hope our audience can start to appreciate you just as much as I do. And when they do, it's like, hopefully everything will be better off as it is.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it, Keegan.